In the dusty little town of Dead Rock Gulch, Arizona, everybody knew Delaney Rose McGrow as the cowgirl with the old, patched-up hat and the stubborn mule. When she got her uncle's run-down land, folks in town called it McGrow's mistake, just sand, cacti, and creepy old stories. They giggled behind her back, watching her try to make something out of that dry dirt with nothing but hard work and guts. But under that cracked desert ground was a secret that would flip everything upside down, a hidden silver treasure worth $120 million had been sitting there since the 1850s, untouched since a mysterious miner vanished without a clue. The second Delaney found that shiny fortune, her name went from a joke to the talk of every miner. Suddenly, the same folks who laughed at her were trying to be her best friend. Will Delaney's new riches bring her the happy ending she always wanted? Or will it wreck the only home she's ever had? Before we dive back in, let us know where you're reading from. And if this story grabs you, make sure to stick around, because tomorrow I've got something super cool for you. The morning sun stretched long shadows across the dusty main street of Dead Rock Gulch as Delaney Rose McGrow walked to Henderson's General Store, her worn boots kicking up tiny clouds of Arizona dirt. At 28, she held herself with the quiet strength of someone who learned early that you earn respect by what you do, not what you say. Her reddish hair, with bits of gray from years under the hot sun, was tied back in a simple bun under her dad's old brown hat, patched with leather that showed her tough life. The silver locket around her neck gleamed in the sunlight, its worn surface holding memories. Inside was the only picture she had of her parents, Thomas and Mary McGrow, taken when they got married in 1845. She touched the locket now, a habit that made her feel safe when things felt unsure, feeling the metal warm against her fingers. The locket was her mom's, handed down through generations of McGrow women, each one tougher than the last. "Morning, Delaney," Mrs. Henderson called from behind the counter, her voice kind but with that tone she used for folks who paid on time but didn't have much money. "Got your usual stuff ready?" Delaney nodded, counting coins from her small leather purse. 2 pounds of flour, a can of beans, and a little bag of coffee, enough to get her through the week if she was, careful. She'd always been careful, stretching every penny until it hurt. The boarding house, where she rented a tiny room above the saloon, took most of her money from odd jobs around town, fixing clothes for ladies, helping with harvests at the Morrison place, and sometimes taming horses for ranchers who didn't care that she was a woman. "Heard you might be getting some land," Mrs. Henderson said, her eyes sparkling with the kind of nosiness small towns love. "Your Uncle Jeremiah, God rest him." The news hit Dead Rock Gulch 3 days ago, brought by the mail rider from the territorial capital. Jeremiah McGrow, her dad's older brother, died in his sleep at 73, leaving a homestead 20 miles northeast of town and a will naming his only living relative. Delaney had met him maybe a dozen times as a kid, a quiet man with kind eyes who visited their family farm before the flu took her parents when she was 16. "Yes, ma'am," Delaney answered, picking up her supplies. "Seems Uncle Jeremiah didn't forget me after all." Mrs. Henderson leaned closer, whispering like she was sharing a secret. "Hope it's more than that desert patch he lived on. Nothing out there but sand, scorpions, and spooky stories. Folks say it's cursed since that miner vanished in 53. The bell above the door jingled as Mayor Cornelius Blackwood walked in, his fancy suit standing out against the plain clothes of most townsfolk. At 55, he moved like a man who always knew he was important, his silver hair neat and his boots shiny enough to show he had help at home. Behind him was his nephew, Marcus Blackwood, a younger guy whose pale eyes looked like he was always scheming. "Miss McGrow," the mayor said politely, "heard you got some land. Congrats." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," Delaney replied, standing a bit taller. The Blackwood family owned the biggest ranch in the territory for 3 generations, and their word mattered when it came to land and laws. "I hope you'll think about our offer to buy that land," Marcus cut in smoothly. "It's rough out. There, not a place for a woman alone. We'd pay a fair price, enough to set you up nice in town." Delaney's jaw tightened. "I haven't even seen it yet, Mr. Blackwood. Seems early to talk about selling." The mayor's smile felt like he was talking to a kid. Of course, but when you see it, You'll get why we're being nice. That land's been trouble for years. Better to let it go before you get too attached." As the Blackwoods talked with Mrs. Henderson, Delaney slipped out of the store, her mind buzzing with questions. Why were the richest folks in town so eager to buy land they said was no good? The thought made her stomach twist as she headed to the blacksmith shop. The clang of hammer on anvil got louder as she got closer, mixed with the hiss of hot metal hitting water. Colt Ramirez worked with focus, like he loved his job. His dark hair was sweaty, and his strong arms moved carefully as he shaped a horseshoe. At 32, he had the calm confidence of someone who'd seen more than just Dead Rock Gulch, but chose to stay here. "Morning, Colt," Delaney called, setting her packages on a crate by the door. He looked up, his brown eyes warm and friendly. "Morning, Delaney. Sorry about your uncle." "Thanks," she said, glad he didn't jump into gossip about her land. "Was wondering if you could check my mule's shoes this week. Gus is favoring his left front hoof." "Sure thing," Colt said, putting down his hammer. "No charge for you. You helped my sister Elena when she was sick last spring, remember? Never thanked you proper for that." The memory made Delaney smile. Elena Ramirez had a bad fever for 3 days, and the town doctor was off delivering a baby. Delaney stayed up 2 nights, using her mom's herbal tricks to cool Elena down, until the fever broke. "Your sister's a good person," Delaney said. "She'd have done the same for me." "She would," Colt agreed. "But you're the one who did it. That counts." Their chat was cut off when Jake Morrison rode up, a rancher in his 40s with a weathered face from years of squinting at far-off horizons. He got off his horse slowly, like his body ached from too many rough rides. "Delaney?" He nodded shortly. "Heard you got Jeremiah's place. You really gonna live out there?" "Gonna check it out first," she said calmly. "Decide. After I see it," Jake spat into the dust. "You'll find trouble. That land's been bad news since Black Pete Morrison vanished. No kin to me, different Morrison. Folks say he hid something out there. Gold, silver, who knows? Point is, nothing good comes from that place." "Superstitions," Colt said softly, but his voice had a careful edge. "Though the land's got a past." "Past?" Jake scoffed. "Haunted's more like it. Sell to the Blackwoods and be done with it. Buy a nice place in town. Maybe find a husband to take care of you." Delaney's temper flared, but she kept cool. "Thanks for the advice, Mr. Morrison, but I can handle my own choices." "Suit yourself," Jake shrugged. "Don't say I didn't warn you when that place shows its true colors." After Jake left, Delaney and Colt stood quietly, watching the dust settle. The blacksmith shop felt safe, full of honest smells like iron and coal, tools that built stuff instead of breaking it. "You don't believe in curses," Delaney said, half asking, half stating. Colt wiped his hands on his apron. "I believe in being careful, and I believe folks should make their own choices without the whole town telling them what to do. The Blackwoods seem real keen on buying land they say ain't worth much." Delaney nodded. "They're into controlling everything. But you think there's more to it?" Colt looked her in the eye. "Your uncle was a smart guy who kept his thoughts to himself. If he left you that land, he had a reason. Maybe you should figure out what it was before deciding. Anything." As Delaney walked back to the boarding house, the locket felt heavier against her chest. The photo inside showed her parents on their wedding day, young and full of hope for a future they couldn't guess. Her dad was a dreamer, always talking about what the desert could hold. Her mom was practical, but got starry-eyed when he talked big. Now, at her own crossroads, Delaney wondered what they'd tell her. Would they say to play it safe and sell to the Blackwoods, or to trust her gut and see what Uncle Jeremiah really left her? The boarding house stood at the end of Main Street, a bit worn but still proud. Mrs. Patterson, the widow who ran it, kept it clean and fair, charging decent rates for simple rooms and meals. Delaney's room was small but cozy, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window facing the desert mountains. That evening, as she sat by the window watching the sunset, Delaney made up her mind. Tomorrow, she'd ride out to see Uncle Jeremiah's homestead herself. She'd ignore the warnings, the advice, the offers to buy, and the doom and gloom. She'd trust her own judgment like her parents taught her. The silver locket caught the last bit of sunlight, and for a moment, Delaney could almost hear her mom's voice. Trust your heart, darling. It knows the way, even when your head's full of doubts. As night fell over Dead Rock Gulch, Delaney Rose McGrow got ready for a trip that would change her life forever. She didn't know that under the desert ground, a huge silver treasure was waiting, or that her uncle's worthless land would soon make her the most talked-about woman in the territory. All she knew was that tomorrow she'd start writing her own story, one that was hers alone to tell. The ride to Uncle Jeremiah's homestead took Delaney through 20 miles of tough desert, where tall cacti stood like old guards under a big blue sky. Gus, her trusty mule, picked his way along a faint trail, his ears twitching at every sound in. The quiet. The morning sun climbed high, promising a hot day in Arizona. As they reached a low hill, the homestead came into view, a simple adobe house that looked like it grew from the desert itself. It was bigger than she expected, with thick walls to keep it cool in summer and warm in winter. A small barn stood nearby, its roof half fallen in, and a hand-dug well sat in what used to be a yard. Delaney got off Gus and tied him to a post Uncle Jeremiah carved from a strong mesquite branch. The quiet was deep, broken only by the wind, rustling through bushes and a hawk crying far above. She stood there, feeling the stillness and a strange peace from the place. The front door was slightly open, its leather hinges cracked from years of desert weather. Delaney pushed it open carefully, stepping into the cool, dim inside. Dust floated in beams of sunlight from small windows, and the air smelled faintly of sage and old campfires. Uncle Jeremiah had lived simply. A rough wooden table sat in the middle of the main room, with 2 handmade chairs. A stone fireplace took up one wall, its shelf holding a few books and some cool-looking rocks. In a corner was a narrow bed with a colorful quilt, probably made by her aunt long ago. The kitchen was basic, a cast-iron stove, some pots, and shelves with jars that still had bits of beans and dried corn. But it was something near the fireplace that caught her eye. Half buried under old newspapers and letters was a rusty pickaxe. The tool was super old, its wooden handle smooth from use, the iron head worn and pitted. Something about it felt special, and Delaney picked it up carefully, surprised by how heavy it was and how it fit in her hands. As she looked closer, she saw faint letters carved into the handle, PM 1853. Her breath stopped as she remembered Jake Morrison's story about Black Pete Morrison, the miner who disappeared years ago. Could this be his? And if it was, how did it end up in Uncle Jeremiah's cabin? A careful search of the cabin didn't turn up much else. Some clothes, basic supplies, and a few things that showed Uncle Jeremiah liked being alone and keeping things simple. She found no letters or diary to explain why he left her this desert land, but the pickaxe felt like it held secrets waiting to be found. That evening, Delaney camped in the cabin, making a small fire in the fireplace and cooking a simple meal from her supplies. As night settled over the desert, the quiet grew deeper, with only far-off coyote howls and the wind whispering through the walls. She lay on Uncle Jeremiah's bed, staring at the wooden ceiling beams, wondering why her uncle chose this lonely place and why he spent his last years here alone. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of shadowy people and shiny treasures hidden under the desert. She woke before dawn to a scraping sound outside, coming from near the well. Wrapping Uncle Jeremiah's old coat around her, she stepped into the cool pre-dawn air. The sky was just starting to lighten when she saw it, a big diamondback rattlesnake, its scales dull in the early light, coiled by the well. The snake was huge and dangerous, its rattle buzzing as it noticed her. But it was acting weird. Instead of slithering away or getting ready to strike, it seemed to be checking something near the well's edge. Delaney grabbed the old pickaxe and used it to gently nudge the snake away. The snake, like it was done exploring, slid toward a dry creek bed near the homestead and vanished into the desert. Something about its calm movement felt purposeful, like it knew where it was going. Curiosity beat her caution, and Delaney followed, keeping her distance with the pickaxe in hand. The creek bed was about 6 feet wide and 3 feet deep, carved by flash floods that roared down from the mountains during rare storms. Now it was dry, with a sandy bottom dotted with smooth rocks and bits of old wood from long-gone water. The snake disappeared into some palo verde trees along the creek, but Delaney's eyes caught something else. There, in the creek bank where erosion had worn away the dirt, was a shiny vein of what looked like silver ore. The metal sparkled in the morning light, almost too bright to be real. Delaney knelt beside it, her heart racing with excitement. She'd seen silver ore before and knew this was the real deal, and this deposit was bigger than anything she'd ever seen. The vein was thick, maybe 3 feet wide, and seemed to go deep into the bank. With shaky hands, she used the pickaxe to chip away at the rock, showing more of the shiny metal. The ore was super pure, with thick silver veins that glowed like stars. As she worked, more of the deposit appeared, showing a huge silver lode hidden under the desert for years. Her uncle's worthless homestead was right above what could be one of the richest silver finds in Arizona's history. Standing in the dry creek bed with the old pickaxe and silver at her feet, Delaney Rose McGrow felt her whole life shift. Everything she thought about her future and her place in the world changed in that moment. The poor cowgirl who came to claim a useless inheritance had just become the owner of maybe the richest silver mine in Arizona. But even as excitement rushed through her, a quiet voice in her head warned her. If this silver was as valuable as it looked, Uncle Jeremiah must have known about it. Why didn't he dig it up? Why live poor when riches were right there? And why were the Blackwoods so eager to buy land they called worthless? As the sun rose higher and the desert got hot, Delaney covered the silver with loose rocks and sand to hide it. She memorized the spot, noting the unique rocks and how the creek curved around a big boulder as a marker. The ride back to Dead Rock Gulch was a blur of racing thoughts and barely contained excitement. She kept a normal pace, knowing that acting rushed could draw attention. By the time she got to town, she'd made some big decisions. First, she wouldn't tell anyone about the silver until she learned how to file a mining claim legally. Second, she'd go back to the homestead soon to check out the silver deposit. More. And third, she'd find out everything she could about Black Pete Morrison and what really happened to him in 1853. As she stabled Gus behind the boarding house and climbed to her room, Delaney felt the weight of her secret. The silver ore in her pocket felt hot, a reminder that her life had taken a wild turn. The poor cowgirl was about to become one of the richest women in the territory, if she could claim her treasure without losing her life. For 3 days, Delaney kept her secret tight, going through her normal routine while her mind buzzed with plans. She fixed Mrs. Patterson's curtains, helped unload supplies at the general store, and tamed a stubborn horse for the Morrison ranch, all while hiding the silver sample under her mattress. Each night, she'd look at it by candlelight, touching the shiny metal and marveling at her luck. But the thrill came with growing worry. Too many questions were unanswered, and too many people seemed interested in land they said was no good. On the 4th day, while sorting Uncle Jeremiah's things, to prepare for another trip to the homestead, she found something that gave her chills. Hidden under a loose floorboard by the fireplace, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a hand-drawn map from the 1850s. The paper was yellow and brittle, with careful notes in faded ink. The map showed old land grants and mining claims, including details, long forgotten or hidden. It showed Uncle Jeremiah's property was bigger than she thought, stretching deep into the desert with landmarks she recognized. Most importantly, it marked mining claims filed by P. Morrison in 1853, right where she found the silver vein. The map said Morrison's claims were never officially filed with the government, leaving the mineral rights in a weird legal spot for over 30 years. If Uncle Jeremiah had this map, it explained why he knew about the silver and why he didn't touch it. Armed with this, Delaney rode back to the homestead the next morning, hiding the map in her saddlebags with her growing collection of tools. She'd bought a mining kit from Henderson's store, saying she wanted to look for garnets as a hobby. Mrs. Henderson bought the story but warned her about wandering the desert alone. At the homestead, Delaney used the map to mark her property's boundaries, stacking stones at corners. The work was hot and tiring, but it showed her how much land Uncle Jeremiah left her. The map suggested her property had not just the silver vein, but maybe other minerals too, marked with strange symbols. Working carefully to avoid attention, she went back to the creek bed and explored the silver deposit. What she found was beyond her dreams. The vein wasn't just on the surface, it went deep underground. Using the old pickaxe and her new tools, she pulled out several pounds of pure ore. But the more she learned about the silver, the more confused she was about Uncle Jeremiah. The ore was so rich that even a small mine could have made him super wealthy. Why did he stay poor? The answer came as she looked at a rich part of the vein. Carved into the rock, faint under years of dirt, were the same initials from the pickaxe, PM 1853. Below them, in smaller letters, were the words, "Here lies my doom." The words sent a shiver through her despite the heat. What did Black Pete Morrison mean? Did he know the silver would bring trouble? Did Uncle Jeremiah feel the same, choosing to stay poor to avoid danger? As she worked, Delaney noticed she wasn't alone. Twice she saw dust clouds on far-off ridges like riders. Were moving around. They could be ranchers or travelers, but something about the way the clouds appeared and vanished felt like someone was watching her. On her third day exploring, her fears were confirmed. While working at the creek bed, hiding ore samples, she heard horses coming. She quickly covered. Her work with rocks and sand, then hid behind a big boulder, her heart pounding. 3 riders came from the south, moving like they knew exactly where to go. Even from far away, she could see they were well-armed and rode fancy horses that showed money. They got off near the cabin and searched everything, the well, the barn, the whole area, like pros. From her hiding spot, Delaney watched them check every inch, especially the well and creek bed, but they didn't find the silver. After an hour, they rode off northeast, leaving only hoof prints and a bad feeling. That evening, back in her boarding house room, Delaney tried to make sense of it. Who were those riders, and what were they looking for? How did they know to search Uncle Jeremiah's land so carefully? And how long before someone else found her silver? She spread the map on her table and studied it by candlelight, trying to figure out its markings. It was more complicated than she thought, with geological surveys and coded notes about specific spots. One note caught her eye, a symbol near the silver vein with the words, "Morrison's Cash, Guardian's Price." She didn't know what it meant, but cash hinted that Black Pete Morrison hid something more than mining claims, and Guardian's Price sounded like it, came with a cost. As she got ready for bed, Delaney made some big choices. First, she needed to tell someone she trusted because her discovery was too huge to handle alone. Second, she needed to learn how to file mining claims to protect her rights. And third, she had to dig deeper into Black Pete Morrison and 1853. The person she trusted most was Colt Ramirez, whose calm honesty made him the obvious choice. But even that was risky. Once she shared her secret, she couldn't take it back, and it could put them both in danger. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of shiny silver, shadowy riders, mysterious maps, and old curses. But under the fear and excitement, Delaney felt a growing sense of purpose. She'd been given a huge chance, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her. Whatever dangers were coming, she'd face them with the same strength that got her through every tough time before. The poor cowgirl was about to play a dangerous game, but she wasn't the naive woman who inherited a worthless homestead anymore. She was learning to think like a planner and prepare for battles ahead. Telling Colt Ramirez came easier than Delaney expected. On a Tuesday morning, she went to his blacksmith shop with a small pouch of her best ore samples. The hammering stopped. As she walked in, and Colt looked up from a horseshoe, sweat on his forehead despite the early hour. "Morning, Delaney," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. "You look like something's on your mind." "I do," she replied, checking. They were alone. "I need to show you something, but I need your promise it stays between us." Colt's face got serious. "You got it." Without another word, Delaney opened the pouch and poured the silver ore onto his workbench. The samples sparkled in the morning light, looking almost alive. Colt stared for a long moment, then picked up a big piece and looked at it closely. "Holy cow," he whispered. "Where'd you find this?" "Uncle Jeremiah's land," Delaney said. "There's a vein in the creek bed that could go on for miles. This isn't just a small find, Colt. It could be worth millions." Colt put down the oar and looked at her, amazed but worried. "Do you know what this means? If word gets out about a find this big, every treasure hunter in the territory will show up at your doorstep." "I know," Delaney said. "That's why I'm keeping it quiet until I can protect it legally. But I can't do this alone, Colt. I need someone I trust, and you're the only one in Dead Rock Gulch who's always been straight with me." Colt was quiet, turning the oar in his hands, studying it like he knew what metal was worth. Finally, he looked at her seriously. "This explains why the Blackwoods want your land so bad. They must know about the silver, or at least think it's there." "How could they know?" Delaney asked. "I only found it a week ago." "Old mining families remember things," Colt said. "Stories get passed down. Maps get handed over. Sometimes what sounds like a tall tale is actually true. If Black Pete Morrison filed claims in the 50s, the Blackwoods might have records." Delaney pulled out the map she found under Uncle Jeremiah's floorboards and spread it on the workbench. Colt studied it carefully, his finger following the lines and notes with interest. "This is Morrison's survey," he said. "These markers show someone knew what they were looking for, and these coded notes might mean there's more than silver on your land." "Like what?" Delaney asked. Colt pointed to some symbols. "These usually mean different minerals. Silver, gold, copper, maybe even gems. Your uncle's land might be sitting on one of the richest spots in Arizona." The size of her discovery started to overwhelm Delaney. She thought the silver was huge, but more minerals made her both thrilled and scared. "What do I do now?" she asked. "How do I keep this safe?" "First, we need to get these samples tested," Colt said. "I know a guy in Tucson who can tell us how pure it is and what it's worth. But we gotta be sneaky. If word leaks before you file a claim, you could lose it all to thieves or crooked officials." "Can you set it up?" Delaney asked. "I can," Colt said. "But you gotta trust me completely. The guy I know is solid, but the trip to Tucson will take a few days, and you can't go to the homestead while I'm gone." "Anything unusual there could make people curious?" Delaney nodded, seeing his point, even though staying away from her land made her nervous. "What about filing claims? How do I make sure my rights are safe?" "That's trickier," Colt admitted. "Mining laws in the territories are messy, and rich folks can challenge claims. You'll need to file with the government in Phoenix, but you also have to live on the land and show you're mining it." "Live on it?" Delaney repeated. "You gotta stay there and work the claim," Colt explained. "The law says miners have to keep working their find, not just file papers and leave. It's to stop people from just sitting on claims." The idea hit Delaney hard. Living alone on that remote land would make her a target for dangerous folks chasing rich mines. But without living there, her claim could be taken. "I can't live out there alone," she said quietly. "Not with what's at stake." "You won't be alone," Colt said firmly. "If you trust me, I'll help you set up and protect your claim. I know a bit about mining, and I can handle tough spots." Delaney looked at him closely, seeing a new toughness in his eyes. "What kind of experience?" she asked. "The kind that taught me how to stay alive where the strongest guy makes the rules." Colt said vaguely. "Let's just say I wasn't always a blacksmith." His mysterious past should have worried her, but it made her feel safer. If she was facing dangers from big money, she needed someone with real skills. "Okay," she said finally. "I'm trusting you with my life and my future. Don't let me down." "I won't," Colt promised, wrapping the ore samples in cloth. "I'll head to Tucson tomorrow and be back in a week. While I'm gone, act normal. Don't change. Your routine or go near the homestead." "What about those riders I saw?" Delaney asked. "Someone's watching the place." Colt's face darkened. "Then we're running out of time. The longer we wait to file your claim, the easier it is for someone to steal it or hurt you." That evening, as Delaney lay in her narrow bed, listening to the boarding house settle, she thought about how her life had flipped in just 2 weeks. The poor cowgirl with a worthless homestead now had a secret worth millions. But with that came dangers she was just starting to get. The ore samples under her mattress were both her ticket to riches and a huge risk. Trusting Colt was her first step to claiming her fortune, but it was a step she couldn't undo. Tomorrow, Colt would head to Tucson to figure out the true value of her find. When he got back, they'd start the risky work of turning her secret into a protected fortune. The silver under the desert was about to change more than just Delaney's life. It would shake up all of Dead Rock Gulch. As she fell asleep, her dreams were full of shiny ore, legal papers, trusty friends, and shadowy enemies, of a future that could bring huge wealth or deadly danger. The week without Colt dragged on forever. Delaney stuck to her routine, but every noise made her jump. Every new face at the boarding house made her heart race. She fixed clothes with shaky hands, helped Mrs. Patterson bake, and worked at the general store, all while fighting the urge to check on her silver. On the 5th day, Mayor Cornelius Blackwood showed up at the boarding house. Delaney was on the porch, pretending to read an old newspaper when his fancy carriage rolled up. He stepped down carefully, adjusting his coat and checking his watch before walking over. "Miss McGrow," he said politely, taking off his hat. "Hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all, Mr. Blackwood," Delaney replied, putting the paper down. "What's up?" "Business, actually," the mayor said, sitting next to her without asking. "I've been thinking about you, a young woman trying to handle that far-off land. It's risky, and I'd like to offer more money for it." Delaney kept her face blank, though her mind was screaming warnings. "I didn't know I had an offer." "Before, sir." "Maybe offer is too strong," Blackwood said with a small smile. "But my nephew Marcus mentioned we're interested. I'm ready to pay a lot. Say, $500 for the whole homestead and all. Mineral rights." $500 was more money than Delaney ever had. Enough for a nice house in town and a few years of easy living. But compared to her silver, it was a joke. The fact that Blackwood was upping his offer for no reason proved he knew, more than he let on. "That's nice of you," she said carefully. "But I'm still checking out the land. Seems early to decide." Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I get why you're hesitant, my dear. But that land's dangerous. The desert's tough, and that spot has a bad history." "What kind of history?" Delaney asked, though she had a guess. "Black Pete Morrison, of course," Blackwood said, like it was obvious. "A bad guy who caused trouble before he vanished. Some say he hid stolen gold out there, and treasure hunters have been poking around for years. Not the kind of folks a nice young woman wants nearby." His warning had enough truth to sound real, but Delaney sensed more to it. "Did you know him?" she asked. "Black Pete, I mean." "No way," Blackwood said quickly. "That was before I came here, but the stories aren't good. He was a killer and a thief, and some say his ghost haunts that land. Silly talk, but it makes the land hard to use or sell." "Yet, you want to buy it," Delaney pointed out. "We've got experience with tough properties," the mayor said smoothly. "We can handle the problems. A young woman alone, though, would have a harder time." After he left, Delaney sat on the porch, thinking hard. Blackwood's bigger offer and his talk about Black Pete Morrison showed he'd been planning to get her land before Uncle Jeremiah died. Did he know about the silver, or was he just chasing old stories? 2 days later, Colt came back from Tucson with news that was both thrilling and scary. They met after dark in his blacksmith shop, the forge cold, and the place empty except for them. Colt spread papers on his workbench, looking serious despite the big news. "The assayer's report is wild," he started, showing a detailed paper with an official stamp. "Your samples are 87% pure silver, some even over 90%. The guy thinks even a small mine could pull out $20 million worth, and it might be way more." Delaney felt dizzy as the size of her wealth sank in. 20 million was unreal, enough to buy whole counties, enough to make her one of the richest people in the West. "That's not all," Colt went on, pulling out another paper. "I had him check the map's weird markings. He says your land probably has gold, copper, and maybe gems, too. The total value could be over $100 million. The number was so huge, Delaney couldn't wrap her head around it. She'd gone from a worthless homestead to maybe the richest mineral field in the West. But that kind of money would make her a target for every dangerous person around. "There's more," Colt said, his voice serious. "I checked mining laws and records in Tucson. Your uncle filed specific mineral claims 3 years ago, right where you found the silver. He never worked them, but he locked in legal rights to all minerals on the land. So my inheritance is safe? Delaney asked, hopefully. Sort of, Colt said. The rights are yours, but only if you live on the land and start mining within 6 months. If someone proves you left the property, they could challenge your claim and take it. Delaney got it right away. She'd need to live at the homestead and start mining soon, or risk losing everything to thieves. But living alone out there would make her an easy target for violent folks. I also found something else, Colt said, showing one last paper. Records show the Blackwoods have been quietly buying mineral rights around your land for 5 years. They control thousands of acres, but your uncle's homestead is like an island in the middle. The pattern was clear. The Blackwoods knew about the area's mineral wealth and were grabbing land to control it all. Uncle Jeremiah's land was the last piece they needed, which explained why they wanted it so bad. They won't give up easy, Delaney said quietly. Nope, Colt agreed. They've got money and power to make things tough if you don't. Sell. There's one more thing, Colt whispered, showing an official certificate with a territorial seal. Your uncle did something smart. He didn't just file regular mining rights. He got special ones that can't be challenged by neighbors or big companies. It's rare, but it makes your claim super strong in court. How'd he do that? Delaney asked, looking at the fancy paper. Your uncle had friends, Colt said. The mining commissioner who signed this, William Harrison, fought with Jeremiah in the Mexican War 20 years ago. Old army buddies can pull strings better than money sometimes. The certificate wasn't just legal protection. It showed Uncle Jeremiah planned for years to make sure Delaney got not just land, but rock-solid mineral rights. There's one more thing, Colt said quietly. In Tucson, I found records about Black Pete Morrison that don't match the town's stories. He wasn't just a miner. He was a federal agent looking into illegal mining and claim stealing in the 1850s. That hit Delaney like a punch. If Black Pete Morrison was a federal agent, not an outlaw, everything she'd heard about him was a lie. Someone spread those stories to keep people from digging into what happened to him. So he wasn't hiding stolen gold, Delaney said, her mind racing. He was investigating thieves and someone killed him for it. Colt finished grimly. Which means the same folks who got rid of him might come after anyone threatening their plans today. The weight of this hit Delaney hard. She wasn't just fighting for her land. She was up against the same enemies who killed a federal agent and hid it for 30 years. 3 days later, Delaney found something that changed everything. She'd gone back to the homestead with Colt to start living there, bringing supplies and tools for a risky but necessary job. While Colt worked outside, fixing the barn and setting up defenses, Delaney searched the cabin again. Near the fireplace, her foot hit a floorboard that sounded hollow. Prying it up revealed a hidden space Uncle Jeremiah built with care. Inside, wrapped in oiled canvas, was a leather journal with Uncle Jeremiah's neat handwriting, starting 3 years ago and going almost to his death. As Delaney read, the full size of her inheritance and its dangers became clear. March 15th, 1884. Heard the mining inspector's coming next month. Gotta make sure our papers are perfect. The Blackwoods are asking too many questions about mineral surveys. I think they know more than they're saying about McGrow land. April 2nd, 1884. Met William Harrison in Phoenix. He remembers our war days and agrees Delaney deserves protection from greedy folks. The special mineral rights should stop any legal fights, but only if she lives on the land. April 20th, 1884. Found proof of my worst fears. The Blackwoods are buying mineral rights based on surveys that shouldn't exist. Someone's been sneaking onto private land, probably using stolen info from territorial records. May 8th, 1884. Learned the truth about Peter Morrison. He wasn't an outlaw. He was a federal investigator looking into illegal mining in the 1850s. His real name was Peter Malcolm Morrison, and he was close to exposing a big scam before he vanished. May 12, 1884. Found Morrison's stuff hidden in a cave near the silver. He had a report about illegal claim stealing and corruption, naming people who were alive when he disappeared, including the mayor's grandpa. Uncle Jeremiah's find about Morrison sent chills through Delaney. If Morrison had proof of corruption, Tied to the Blackwood's ancestors, it explained why they wanted her land and why they kept people from looking too closely. June 3rd, 1884. The silver deposit's bigger than I thought. It could be worth 50 million, maybe twice that. But I won't touch it while I'm alive. Too dangerous for an old man alone. I'll leave it to Delaney and hope she's brave and smart enough to handle it. August 15th, 1884. Someone's watching. The homestead. Found signs of riders spying from the ridge. I've hidden all signs of the silver, but I think they're on to me. October 30th, 1884. Met Marshal Torres from the Capitol in secret. He says federal folks still care about Morrison's case and want new evidence. Set up a coded message system in case something happens to me before Delaney gets her inheritance. December 1st, 1884. My health's getting worse fast. Hid this journal and Morrison's report where Delaney will find them if she looks hard. Pray she understands what she's getting and stays safe. The last entry, just 2 weeks before Uncle Jeremiah died, was shaky from his illness. January 10th, 1885. If Delaney's reading this, I'm gone. And she's got a huge fortune and a dangerous secret. The silver under McGrow land is worth more than most folks see in a lifetime, but it cost Peter Morrison his life and could cost hers if she's not careful. Trust no one in Dead Rock Gulch except Colt Ramirez. He's not what he seems, but he's honest with her. The truth about Morrison is in the cave where I found his stuff. May God keep her safe from those who'd steal her birthright. Delaney put down the journal, shaking from her uncle's words. He'd known about the silver for years and found proof of corruption and murder going back decades. Most importantly, he'd named Colt Ramirez as someone she could trust, hinting he knew more about Colt than he ever said. When Colt came back to the cabin that evening, Delaney showed him the journal. His face changed as he read the last part mentioning him. "Your uncle was sharper than I thought," Colt said quietly. "He figured out who I really am." "And who's that?" Delaney asked, though she had a hunch. Colt stared out the window at the moonlit desert for a long time. "My name's Colt Ramirez, and I'm a blacksmith," he said carefully. "But I'm also a deputy U.S. Marshal, working undercover in Dead Rock Gulch for 2 years to find proof against the Blackwoods and their friends." The news should have shocked her, but it felt right. Uncle Jeremiah's trust in Colt, plus her own gut, had prepared her for this. "So you've been investigating the Blackwoods all along," she said. "Among others," Colt confirmed. "The territorial government thinks there's a big scam to steal mineral rights, but it's hard to prove. The Blackwoods are careful, and they've got powerful friends." "What about Morrison's murder?" Delaney asked. "That case is still open," Colt said. "If your uncle found Morrison's report, it could give us what we need to reopen it and charge everyone involved." Delaney realized she was in the middle of something way bigger than her land. The silver was worth millions, but her uncle's evidence might be even more valuable for justice. "What now?" she asked. "Now we find Morrison's report," Colt said firmly, "and make sure everyone who killed him pays for it." As they got ready to sleep in the cabin, Delaney thought about how her life had changed in 3 weeks. She'd inherited a silver mine worth millions and a duty to expose. A decades-old scam and get justice for a murdered agent. The poor cowgirl, mocked by Dead Rock Gulch, was about to be the key witness in one of the biggest criminal cases in the territory. The cave where Uncle Jeremiah found Morrison's stuff was hidden 3 miles northeast of the homestead, behind Palo Verde trees, with a narrow entrance you had to crawl through. Delaney and Colt found it on their second day of searching, using the journal's hints and Colt's knowledge of how agents hide evidence. The entrance was so well hidden they might have missed it without a small pile of stones Uncle Jeremiah left as a marker. Inside, the cave opened into a room big enough for 2 to stand, with walls marked by old campfires and a floor full of decades-old junk. But in a crevice at the back, they found something that changed everything about Morrison's disappearance and Delaney's inheritance. A leather saddlebag, sealed against water and bugs, held Morrison's things in great condition after 30 years. There was a badge showing he was a federal investigator, letters from his bosses in Washington, and a report about corruption way beyond the territory. But under his official papers was something unexpected. wanted posters for an outlaw named Black Pete Morrison, with proof that Peter Malcolm Morrison, the agent, used the outlaw's name as a cover for his investigation. He was undercover, Colt said, looking at the posters by lamplight. The real Black Pete died in a Mexican prison 2 years before our Morrison got here. He used the outlaw's name to avoid suspicion while checking out the corruption. That explained why stories about Black Pete were so mixed up, and why the Blackwoods pushed the tale of hidden gold to keep people from digging into the truth. But the biggest shock was still coming. Under the posters was a geological survey from 1852 by an Eastern mining consortium, with reports and estimates that pinpointed the silver under what became Uncle Jeremiah's land. "This survey's a year before Morrison's work," Delaney whispered. "Someone knew about the silver way back then." Colt looked at it, amazed. "This explains it all. The scam wasn't just stealing claims, it was taking over a whole region based on secret surveys. They knew what was there and grabbed the best land." The survey listed names from Uncle Jeremiah's journal, including Cornelius Blackwood's grandpa and other big territorial families. "My gosh," Colt said, reading over her shoulder. "This shows deposits worth hundreds of millions across, thousands of acres. If they got all this land, they'd control the biggest mineral empire in the West." The final document in Morrison's bag showed the full size of the scam. A map of illegal land deals, fake papers, and murdered or scared-off claimants across 3 territories. Morrison wasn't just looking into claim stealing, Delaney realized. He was uncovering a huge plan to take a region's mineral wealth through fraud and violence. The map showed dozens of properties where owners died or vanished, their land taken by companies tied to the Eastern Mining Consortium. It was a clear, awful pattern. "This is why they killed him," Colt said grimly. Morrison had proof that could have wrecked the biggest mining families and sent dozens to jail or the gallows. One case made Delaney's blood freeze. Morrison's notes said her parents, Thomas and Mary McGrow, filed mineral claims on their farm just weeks before. They died in the 1873 flu outbreak. Their claims were quietly given to Blackwood associates after their deaths. "They killed my parents," Delaney whispered, barely audible in the cave's silence. Colt's face was grim. "The timing's too perfect. They filed claims, and a month later, they died from a disease that didn't touch their neighbors." Knowing her parents were murdered by the same scam now threatening her filled Delaney with a cold anger that cut through her fear. She'd spent 12 years thinking flu took her parents, never guessing they were killed to steal their inheritance. "There's more," Colt said, pulling out the last paper. "This list, from just before Morrison vanished, names people the scam planned to get rid of or scare into selling. The list had a dozen names, with Jeremiah McGrow circled at the top, marked "Eliminate before he can file formal claims." Uncle Jeremiah knew he was in danger, Delaney realized. That's why he waited to file his claims and made them bulletproof, and why he lived poor instead of mining the silver, Colt added. He knew digging it up would get him killed. As they packed Morrison's evidence and left the cave, Delaney felt 30 years of wrongs heavy on her shoulders. She wasn't just fighting for her land. She was carrying the duty to get justice for her parents, Morrison, and dozens of other victims of the scam that controlled the territory's wealth for years. "What now?" she asked as they stepped into the desert sun. "Now we finish what Morrison started," Colt said firmly. "We gather the proof, build a case no one can ignore, and make sure everyone responsible pays." But even as they rode back to the homestead with the evidence hidden in their saddlebags, Delaney knew their enemies wouldn't give up easy. The Blackwoods and their allies had killed to keep their secrets before, and would kill again to stop them from coming out. The poor cowgirl with a desert homestead was now the most dangerous person in Arizona, not because of her silver, but because of the evidence that could destroy the West's biggest criminal scam. 3 days after finding Morrison's evidence, Delaney learned Colt's real identity as Deputy U.S. Marshal Colt Ramirez, and it changed everything about their teamwork and their plan to expose the scam. She found his marshal's badge hidden in a secret compartment in his tool chest, along with letters showing the full scope of his undercover work. The badge was silver, scratched, and worn from years of use. Attached was a letter from the U.S. Marshal's office in Denver, 2 years old, giving Deputy Marshal Ramirez permission to investigate territorial corruption however he needed. "You've been lying to me from the start," Delaney said that evening, her voice full of hurt and anger. "I've been protecting you from the start," Colt said calmly, not denying it. "Everything I said about wanting to help you was true. I only hid that I'm a marshal investigating the crimes you found." "But you knew about my parents," Delaney said. "You knew they were murdered and let me think it was the flu." "For weeks." Colt looked pained. "I suspected, but I couldn't prove it without Morrison's evidence, and I couldn't risk my investigation by telling you too soon." The betrayal stung, not because of Colt's actions, but because it shook the trust and feelings she'd built with him. Everything, the trust, the growing liking, the teamwork, felt tainted knowing he'd been hiding this. "How do I know anything between us is real?" she asked, hating how weak she sounded. "Because this is real," Colt said, showing her telegrams from his files. "These are messages I sent my bosses over the past month, asking for federal protection for you and a role as a witness. I've been fighting to keep you safe, even if it meant risking my cover." Delaney read the telegrams, stunned. Colt had been pushing for her safety at the federal level, even suggesting the government buy her mineral rights at a fair price to keep them safe. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her anger fading. "Because I needed you to decide for yourself what was right, not because a marshal told you," Colt said. "And I had to be sure you could handle this kind of secret. It could get us both killed if it got out." Their talk was cut off by riders approaching the homestead in the dark. Colt put out the lamp and moved to the window, his hand on his gun. Through the darkness, they saw 6 riders circling the cabin, moving like a trained team. "Federal marshals," Colt said, recognizing their style. "My backup's here." The lead rider got off his horse and called out, "Deputy Marshal Ramirez, this is Marshal James Torres from Denver. Show yourself and confirm your status." Colt stepped onto the porch, his badge shining in the moonlight. "Ramirez here, Marshal Torres. My investigation's done, and we've got the evidence to make arrests." Torres, a tough man in his 50s who'd faced down big criminals, approached with 2 deputies while others kept watch. "Miss McGraw," Torres said, taking off his hat, "I hear you've helped uncover federal crimes. The government's thankful and ready to protect you during this investigation." "What does that mean?" Delaney asked, still processing her new role as a federal witness. "It means you're under U.S. Marshal protection starting tonight," Torres said. "We have warrants for Cornelius Blackwood, Marcus Blackwood, and 17 others tied to the scam that killed Peter Morrison and stole mineral rights across the territory." Torres spread legal papers on Uncle Jeremiah's table, each with official seals listing charges like murder, conspiracy, mail fraud, and breaking mining laws. "The evidence you and Ramirez found is enough for charges that could mean life in prison or worse for the main players," Torres said. "But we need your testimony to show the full scam and make sure the evidence holds up in court." "What about my mineral rights?" Delaney asked, worried. "The government might mess with her claim." "They're protected by federal law," Torres said. "In fact, we're ready to pay you a big sum for access to your land during the investigation. The minerals stay yours, but we need to survey them to understand their role in the scam, as I." The marshal set up security around the homestead and started documenting the evidence. Delaney realized how huge their plan was. They were taking down one of the West's biggest criminal networks, one that had run free for decades. "Arrests start tomorrow morning," Torres said. "We're working with Phoenix and Tucson to grab everyone at once. If they get a chance to talk or destroy evidence, some might get away." "Will I be safe?" Delaney asked, thinking of the men who killed her parents and Morrison. "You'll have protection as long as needed," Torres promised. "But these are dangerous folks with money and connections. Until they're locked up, you gotta be super careful who you trust and where you go." That night, as marshals guarded the homestead for the biggest law enforcement job in the territory, Delaney lay awake thinking about her journey. 3 weeks ago, she was a mocked cowgirl. Now she was a federal witness, owner of millions in mineral rights, and the person whose testimony would decide if justice came for decades of crimes. She thought of her parents, Uncle Jeremiah and Peter Morrison, who died trying to expose the scam. Tomorrow, the fight would begin, and the poor cowgirl with a desert homestead would help take down the territory's most powerful criminal family. The silver was valuable, but the justice it would bring was worth way more. The attack came at dawn, just as the marshals were getting ready to ride into Dead Rock Gulch for arrests. Delaney was at the cabin window, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold and red, when she saw a big dust cloud coming fast from the south. "Marshal Torres," she called. "We've got company coming quick. Torres and his deputies." Took defensive spots around the homestead, rifles ready, moving like they'd fought in the frontier before. Colt gave Delaney a loaded revolver, calmly explaining how to use it if things got bad. "Stay low and behind cover," he said. "These guys are fighting for their lives, so they're super dangerous." The riders turned into a group of 12, all armed and charging like an army. Leading them was Marcus Blackwood, his face full of anger, rifle ready. "Federal marshals!" Torres shouted as they got close. "Stop and drop your weapons now!" The answer was a blast of gunfire that broke the morning quiet, bullets flying around the cabin. One deputy yelled as a shot hit him, knocking him behind a water trough. The fight for the McGrow homestead was on. Delaney hid behind the cabins. Thick walls, her heart pounding as bullets hit around her. Through the window, she saw Colt and the marshals shooting back carefully, trying not to kill if they could. But the attackers didn't care, firing wildly to overwhelm them. "They know we have the evidence," Torres yelled over the noise. "They're not trying to catch us. They want us dead." Seeing the Blackwoods willing to kill federal officers to hide their secrets gave Delaney a fierce determination. She'd been scared of their power, but now they were just criminals fighting justice. From her spot, she saw the attackers made a mistake. Charging across open ground left them open to the marshals' fire. The marshals, trained for this, used cover well to take out the riders one by one. Marcus Blackwood saw his attack failing and shouted for his men to pull back. But as he turned his horse, a deputy's shot hit it, throwing Marcus to the ground hard. "Marcus Blackwood," Torres called. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and attacking federal officers. Surrender now, and tell your men to drop their guns." Marcus got up and fired at the cabin, the bullet whizzing by Delaney's head. Without thinking, she raised her revolver and shot, the gun kicking as the bullet hit Marcus's shoulder, making him drop his rifle. Seeing their leader hurt broke the attackers' spirit, and they started dropping their weapons and surrendering. "Federal marshals," Torres shouted again. "Keep fighting and you'll face treason charges. Surrender now for fair treatment." The fight that seemed headed for blood ended in surrender. The surviving attackers got off their horses and let the deputies tie them up, their faces showing they knew their scam was over. As the smoke cleared, Delaney stood in the cabin doorway, holding the smoking revolver. The silver nugget in her pocket felt warm, a reminder of the fortune that brought danger and justice. "Is it over?" she asked Colt, who was wrapping a small wound on his arm from a bullet graze. "The shooting's done," he said. "But the legal fight's just starting. We still need to arrest the rest and get them to trial." Marshal Torres walked up, looking serious. "Miss McGrow, Marcus Blackwood's attack means the others know they're exposed. Some might try to run before we catch them." "Then we move fast," Delaney said, surprised by her own strength. "These men killed my parents and Morrison and stole from honest folks for years. I won't let them get away." Her shift from scared homesteader to justice fighter felt right, like it was always her purpose. The silver was valuable, but exposing the scam was worth more. The final showdown with Mayor Cornelius Blackwood happened in Dead Rock Gulch's town hall, where he'd locked himself with his last loyal men after hearing about Marcus's capture and the failed attack. When the marshals got to town that afternoon, the mayor had declared martial law, trying to rally folks against what he called an illegal federal takeover. But the papers Delaney carried, Uncle Jeremiah's original land, deed from 1852 with official seals, ended the Blackwoods' corruption. "This deed predates every claim the Blackwoods made to mineral rights here," Marshal Torres told the townsfolk, reading it aloud. "It proves Jeremiah McGrow's land was legally his, and any attempt to take it was a federal crime, A.R.K." Blackwood came out of the town hall with his men, his face pale, knowing his family's criminal world was falling apart. At 70, he still acted important, but his shaking hands showed he knew the evidence was too much. "You have no power here," he said weakly. "This is a territorial issue, not federal. Murdering federal agents makes it federal," Torres said coldly. "So does conspiring to cheat the government out of mineral rights and taxes. Cornelius Blackwood, you're under arrest for crimes going back 30 years. The handcuffs on the mayor's wrists marked the end of the Blackwoods' control over Dead Rock Gulch. For generations, they'd run the town with fear and scams. Their fall was so fast that many townsfolk stood shocked, unable to believe the powerful family was now just criminals in cuffs. But papers found in the mayor's safe showed the full size of their crimes. Marshal Torres and his deputies found records of every illegal land deal, fake deed, and murder the Blackwoods did over 30 years. "They kept track of everything," Colt said, amazed, looking at the papers. "Names, dates, methods, like they were proud of it." "Arrogance," Torres said grimly. "They thought they'd never get caught, so they treated crimes like business deals." The papers showed the scam reached corrupt officials in the territorial government, with bribes, to judges and commissioners to protect the Blackwoods. "This goes to Washington," Torres said. "Some of these officials will face federal arrests." For Delaney, the worst find was a file planning her parents' murder, with details on making it look like a natural illness. The cold way it described killing Thomas and Mary McGrow made her shake with anger. "They planned it for months," she said, barely keeping her voice steady. "They studied their habits, their health, even their neighbors. The flu story was ready before they died." Colt gently took the papers from her. "You don't need to read more. We have enough to make sure they all pay." The townsfolk of Dead Rock Gulch slowly realized Delaney Rose McGrow, the cowgirl they'd mocked, had helped expose the scam that controlled their town. As word spread about the silver and the federal case, their view of her shifted from pity to awe and respect. Mrs. Henderson came up to Delaney outside the town hall as the marshals finished arrests. "Miss McGrow, I owe you an apology. We all do. We didn't know what you were up against." "You couldn't have," Delaney said kindly. "The Blackwoods were good at hiding their crimes and looking respectable." "What happens to the town now?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "Without the Blackwoods, who's in charge?" "The people," Delaney said confidently. "The way it should have always been." As the sun set over Dead Rock Gulch, Delaney stood with Colt outside Uncle Jeremiah's cabin, watching the marshals prepare to take their prisoners to court. In Phoenix, the silver under her feet was still there, worth a fortune. But its discovery did something bigger than making her rich. "The truth's out," Colt said, taking her hand. "Morrison's murder is solved. Your parents' deaths are avenged, and one of the West's worst scams is done." "And now?" Delaney asked, looking at the desert that hid so many secrets. "Now we build something better," Colt said. "A town based on fairness and honesty, not fear and scams. A place where folks like your parents can chase dreams without being killed for it." The land deed in her hands felt real, tying her to the legacy her parents and Uncle Jeremiah died for. The poor cowgirl with a desert homestead had become the tool of justice for a whole territory, and the silver that brought danger would now fund a better future for everyone. 6 months after the Blackwood arrests, Delaney Rose McGrow stood on the porch of her bigger homestead, wearing a new silver-trimmed hat that shone like starlight. The desert, once harsh, now felt like true home, not just where she lived, but a land she'd fought for with grit and heart. The silver mine was now a real business, hiring 30 men from Dead Rock Gulch and nearby. Under Delaney's lead, the McGrow Silver Company was one of the West's most honest and profitable mines, paying good wages and keeping workers safe while pulling out the wealth Uncle Jeremiah knew was there. "Morning, Mrs. Ramirez," called Tom Henderson, the mine foreman, with the daily report. "Another big day yesterday, $2,000 worth of silver, and we're nowhere near the vein's end." Delaney smiled at her new married name. 3 months ago, she and Colt wed in a ceremony led by Marshal Torres, with federal agents, miners, and townsfolk who now respected her. "Thanks, Tom," she said, taking the report. "How's the new shaft's safety?" "Top notch," Henderson said. "Your husband's engineering fixes made it the safest mine around. No accidents, no cave-ins, and his air system keeps it clean deep down. Dead Rock Gulch had changed, as much as Delaney. With the Blackwoods corruption gone, the town elected honest leaders focused on growth. The mine's payroll brought money to families, and new businesses opened every month. Elena Ramirez, now Elena Morrison, after marrying Jake Morrison's son, started a school for kids across the region. Mrs. Patterson turned the boarding house into a hotel for investors drawn by the town's new honest reputation. A memorial in the town square, carved from silver quartz from Delaney's mine, honored Peter Morrison and 37 other victims of the Blackwood scam. The federal prosecutor says the trials are going well, Colt said, joining her on the porch, wiping coal dust from his hands after working in the mine's shed. Cornelius Blackwood and his crew will likely get life in prison, and some officials are already convicted. Good, Delaney said, though she knew no justice could bring back the dead. My parents and Uncle Jeremiah can rest now. They stood quietly, watching the mine's busy work in the distance. The silver that caused so much pain was now bringing honest jobs and wealth to the town. The curse over the land was broken by telling the truth. Marshal Torres wants to know if you'd help with other corruption cases, Colt said. Your work on the Blackwoods made you an expert on mining scams. Maybe, Delaney said thoughtfully, but only after the mine and town are solid. Dead Rock Gulch needs to show what honest work can do. That afternoon, officials from Phoenix and federal folks came to see the mine and the town's changes from Delaney's courage. William Harrison, the mining commissioner who helped Uncle Jeremiah, checked the mine. Mrs. Ramirez, he said, your honest business and community work are noticed high up. There's talk of making your mine a model for the West. I'm honored, Delaney said, but I just wanted to honor my family and build something good from Uncle Jeremiah's gift. You've done more than anyone expected, Harrison said. Your silver's helping hundreds, and your examples pushing honest business across the territory. As evening came and the visitors left, Delaney and Colt walked to the small cemetery behind the homestead, where Uncle Jeremiah was, buried next to graves for her parents and Morrison. The sunset painted the mountains gold and red, like the morning she found the silver. Would they be proud? Delaney asked, touching Uncle Jeremiah's headstone. They'd be amazed, Colt said. Uncle Jeremiah hoped you'd claim your inheritance. Your parents wanted prosperity and justice. Morrison died to expose corruption. You made all their dreams come true. Her silver-trimmed hat caught the last sunlight, its threads shining like the metal that brought danger and redemption. But the hat was more than wealth. It showed her change from a poor cowgirl to a businesswoman, leader, and justice fighter. As they walked back under the desert sky, Delaney thought about her journey from mockery to respect, poverty to wealth, fear to courage. The silver was valuable, but the strength she found inside was the real treasure that would last forever. The poor cowgirl who got a worthless homestead had built a better future for her town. And in the silver-trimmed hat that shone like starlight as night fell over Dead Rock Gulch, she carried the reminder that the greatest treasures aren't in the ground, but in the courage to do what's right, no matter the cost.